Hello, and welcome to the Connected Table Live on W4CY Radio, the weekly show that brings you influential tastemakers and dynamic leaders, both front and center and behind the scenes, in food, wine, spirits, and hospitality. We're your hosts, David Ransom and Melanie Young, your insatiably curious culinary couple. Food, beverage, and hospitality is our livelihood, and enjoying it is our way of life. You can follow us at Connected Table and hashtag Connected Table. And this show will also be available on iHeartMedia at www.iheartradio.com. So we are heading west today. We are spotlighting Napa, and in particular, the pioneering Louis Martini Winery. Our guest is Michael Martini, third-generation winemaker at the estate his grandfather, Louis M. Martini, founded 80 years ago. We shared our first glass of wine with Mike and his lovely wife Jackie at the Food and Wine Classic in Aspen several years ago. And then we shared another and another of his singular Louis Martini Cabernet Sauvignon. Mike grew up in the family business, working alongside his grandpa and his dad, learning firsthand what it takes to make world-class wines. When he wasn't in school back then, it was rural St. Helena. He was working at the winery in the vineyard or out riding horses. As an adult, he embarked on the formal study of viticulture that reads like the Vintner's Grand Tour, studying at UC Davis, exploring vineyards in Bordeaux and Burgundy with the late vintner mentor Andrei Chelychev, and of course, developing his own personal style to bring balance and texture to his Cabernet Sauvignon Blancs. Mike took the reins as winemaker at Louis Martini Winery in 1977, ushering in a new era in winemaking while honoring the winery's roots and commitment to delivering big, unforgettable wines. Although Mike's personal winemaking style continues to evolve, he will always aim to create wines that are balanced, complex, and well-suited to accompany foods. With the Gallo family's acquisition of Louis Martini Winery in 2002, the Martini family continues its timeless winemaking tradition while also experimenting with smaller production red wines at its cellar 254 Artisan Winery in St. Helena. Mike shares his grandfather's passion for the Napa Valley region and is past president of the Napa Valley Vintners Association, an organization his grandfather helped establish. He is also past president of the American Society of Enology and Viticulture and of the Trellis Alliance at UC Davis, and he just told us he's also part of a group of winemaking men called Men Who Cook. So welcome.
Well, thank you. I don't think I need to say anything after that introduction.
Show's over. We have lots of questions. Your show's over. All right. I think David's going to take it away.
Anyway, Michael, we're thrilled to have you on. I know it's been a while since we've actually seen each other or chatted, but when we thought of the concept for the show, what we really wanted to do is try to envelop as much of the culinary and wine and spirits world as possible, and you were really the first wine guest we turned to. You've got such a great history in Napa, and your family has such a great history in Napa that we couldn't think of a better way to kind of kick off the wine section of our show than really have you on and talk about Martini wines and your family's history in Napa, et cetera. So welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about, for those folks that are listening that don't really know Martini wines all that well, you know, it's a very storied brand in Napa. It's been around for 80 years. It's got a great history not only in Napa, but really around the world at this point, due to the hard work and wonderful wines that you all create every year. But tell us a little bit about how Martini got started and kind of what its philosophy is as a winery.
Okay. That's take an hour and a half.
Well, the short version.
So my grandfather came over from Liguria, Italy in 1900 and started in the wine business in 1906. And our first real winery was in 1908 in Pleasanton, which is the East Bay of the San Francisco Bay. And it went bankrupt about 1911, and he became a winemaker for hire until 1922, when he invested with two other partners in the San Joaquin Valley. This is during Prohibition, and changed the name of the company to Louis M. Martini Grape Products Company, and made grape concentrate that he shipped to the Italians in New Jersey, New York, Philadelphia, places like that. They take it home. He'd ship it by the barrel, and they take it home and dump it in the bathtub and turn on the tap and reconstitute it. And, of course, yeast are in the air and would take off and ferment, and voila, you have Dago Red. and that's how the Italians made it through Prohibition. At the same time, he got his distilling license and was making fortified wines, which are like sherries and ports. These were used for sacramental and medicinal purposes, and he had, in fact, a contract. I just looked this up because a friend of mine owns Brotherhood Winery in New York, which is bonded winery number 2, starting in 1829.
That's right. I know Brotherhood very well because my family owned a winery about 15 miles away for 25 years, and
really?
Cesar Baeza,
Yeah.
the owner and the managing partner at Brotherhood, is a good friend of ours.
Yeah. So Caesar had emailed me. Caesar and I go way back, and Caesar emailed me and said, "I know you're part of our history." So when I looked it up in the Bancroft Library at UC Berkeley, in actual fact, we were making 75 to 100,000 gallons a year during Prohibition of sacramental wines for Brotherhood.
That's a lot of Sacramento wine.
Wow.
That's a lot of Sacramento wine. Plus, we made some for ourselves, I'm sure.
Of course.
So he was in the San Joaquin Valley initially, which is a very hot climate, and they grow grapes like Alicante Bouschet and Ruby Red, stuff like that, which aren't really great wine grapes. So when Prohibition was imminent in 32, he came up to the Napa Valley and started looking around. And in the spring of 33, purchased the property that we're presently on. And then in the summer, he built the winery. And in the fall, he did the first crush. Repeal was December 5th, 1933, and he had goods to go. So that was the beginning of Louis Martini Napa Valley, 81 years ago.
Wow.
My father graduated from the UC Davis program. At that time was in Hewitt Hall at UC Berkeley. It was before they had the land grant and put the farm in. And he graduated the class of 41 in food technology, went off to the war, came back in 46 and kind of took over the winemaking in 46. So my grandfather was really a winemaker from 1906 to 1946. My father from 1946 through 1976. I worked 74, 5, and 6 with him after I got out of the military, and I was going to Davis at the same time. And he said, "Well, you got to learn to make your own mistakes." So in 1977, he didn't show up. Actually, he fell down and he broke his ankle on a tasting weekend with Joseph Heitz and Peter Mondavi and Chuck Carpy. And they had a group that went on forever, and they went up to a place on the coast for a long weekend before harvest started, and he fell down and broke his leg, and Peter Mondavi helped him get to the hospital in Fort Bragg, where a doctor named Gallo
Oh, wow.
Oh, my.
was actually the doctor. Herb Kane was a friend of my grandfather's and
my
the
goodness.
family, and he picked up on it. It was all over the San Francisco Chronicle. How
That's
Mondavi
pretty
was
funny.
eating to Gallo. So,
Well, and not only that, but you actually made the jump to Gallo a number of years ago, but we'll get to that later. I want to kind of talk about how the philosophy of Martini is really kind of based on Cabernet, and really Martini wines over the years have been some of the best Cabernets out there. Melanie and I have the distinct pleasure of actually having some Louis M. Martini Cabernets that go back to the 60s in our own cellar, and haven't had them yet. I think you and I have chatted about them a little bit before, but they're really well known to be not only extremely well made, but they age so well. And tell us a little bit about what the philosophy of Martini Cabernet itself is, and how you created it, and whether it was under your watch or your father's watch or your grandfather's watch, as to really how that style came about.
yeah, I think it was each of us have our own personality and thus our own style. But my grandfather, of course, came from Europe, and so his tastes were towards the European making big, bold Cabernets. And then my father's personality was the opposite of my grandfather's, because he had to get along with my grandfather and work. So where my grandfather was very gregarious and outgoing and was the type of personality that would take over a room, and so were his wines, my father was called the gentle giant. He was 6'4" and very quiet, very calm, quite the scientist. And he made these beautifully elegant, silky wines that were extremely well integrated, which I think is probably the base of the philosophy, is that the balance is everything in terms of aging. You have to have balance in the beginning to have balance in the end. If you have too much tannin in the beginning, all you have when the wine ages out is too much tannin, or a bunch of junk at the bottom of your bottle.
Well, that's so true.
Yeah, and if you have too much acid, you have too much acid in the end. So all of those components have to be balanced from the very beginning. And of course, it really starts with the vineyard. We have 3 generations of making wine out of the same vineyards. And not only that serves on 2 fronts, because I grew up drinking my grandfather's and my father's wines, there's a signature line in my brain of taste that says Martini on it.
Right.
And when I evaluate a wine and what I'm going to do to it in the tank to make the style that is known as Martini, it's just automatic to me where I'm going to go with it. And my father was the same way, and my grandfather probably started that pretty much. So even though we had the discontinuity of these personalities, and I'm halfway between my father and my grandfather in terms of personality, so I kind of bounced back towards a little bit bigger, a little bit chewier type of wines. But even though we had that difference, we had the same vineyards and the same basic philosophy working for us. Probably a little more European than most of the California wineries. We believe in a little higher acid. We believe in a little gentler type of tannins, but yet I believe in having plenty of texture there. So I think that holds all of us together.
Sure, and I think it's interesting because when you talk about the fact that you've had now 3 generations working the same plot of land, the same vineyard, you really all get to know that land and what it brings into the grapes and what the grapes get out of it so well that you can create a consistency, which is really part of what the Martini legacy is. I mean, your wines are consistently great year after year, and they're always a really good, well-balanced, wonderful style, whether they're young or aged. And I think that's really a testament to what you were just talking about, which is the fact that you've been able to work that land for so long and you know it so well and can create the wine that you want from it.
Yeah, so we have some absolutely beautiful landscapes. So, if you were to look at, say, my Monte Rosso Cabernet, that's a vineyard up on top of the Mayacamas Mountains that my grandfather purchased in 1938. And it's probably our star vineyard. I mean, it was last year, this California Senate Bill 9 created viticultural treasures. And these are old vineyards that have really lent to the fame of California. There's about 20 of them, and Monte Rosso is right up there in the top 3. So it is recognized. We sell fruit to other wineries, and they use the word Monte Rosso on the label. We license them to do so. And we make sure that they're our friends, and that we make sure they know how to make good wine, so we don't trash the reputation of Monte Rosso.
Well, there you go. That's certainly true. I want to kind of talk about when you kind of took over the helm at Martini. Were there any changes that you implemented to kind of make it your style?
Oh, absolutely. The first thing that happened was it's a good experience for you. If you sniff wine in a brandy sniffer, you really break down the aroma profile to the minutest little points. And when I went to France in '81, I noticed most of the French winemakers used a brandy sniffer in the cellar to, more than anything else, to take out the background noise, the cellar smells and stuff like that, so they could really focus on the wine. So I started that practice, and I realized that I was making these wines so subtly balanced that when you put them in a regular, 9-ounce glass, that didn't smell like anything. And at the time, I was making 6 different red varietals and about 5 different white varietals, and they got indistinguishably close to each other in terms of, because I was using the same basic processes. About the same time, wineries like Acacia, who was focused on Pinot Noir, and Silver Oak, which was focused on Cabernet, were coming into the marketplace with just one varietal. And that was really pushing me to the wall to make better wines, much more distinctively varietal than before. And so I started divvying up my techniques, you might say, like using stems and whole clusters back in the Pinot Noir. I wouldn't do that in Cabernet.
Sure.
And different types of oaks for the different wines and stuff like that. So I really started trying to put a varietal personality into the wines. And at the same time, what was happening out in the marketplace was that the distributors, I guess a maturing industry, the distributors were consolidated into bigger and bigger and fewer distributors. And at our little size of about 150,000 cases at the time, it was really hard to be recognized. I think we had like 400 distributors on in the United States, and which means we didn't do a lot with any one of them.
Well, exactly, and it's obviously that's changed a lot over the last 15 or 20 years with consolidation.
Yeah.
Well, it's huge. It's like these two pyramids. I'm not sure how this works, but they say like 5% of the wine consumers buy like 80% of all the wine. And we were 6 wineries in the Napa Valley in the 1930s. I believe there's 550 wineries now, something more like 700 or 800 virtual labels.
Right.
And the same amount of grapes. And so they're all competing for that 5%. So your competition, has increased 100-fold. And it's pretty amazing. I mean, we are increasing the advent of the Chinese consumer coming online and so forth. We are increasing market share, but it's just not as fast as we're increasing wineries, it seems to me. So everybody's got their hand in it. Most of the wineries are very small, 1,000 cases or under, and they're all competing for the same consumer. So that paints a picture on the high end of it, and then the base end of it are the big boys. You have E&J Gallo, you have Constellation, you have Treasury, you have Diageo, and these guys own multiple labels. And if you were to walk into, say, Costco, I would venture to guess, and it's one of the Costco specialty stores, that 90% of the labels are owned by the big 6.
Wow.
And so on that end, where it's price sensitive, and we're talking like $15 and under, that these small wineries can't afford to put a wine out there.
Right.
Yeah.
So they really have to then concentrate on the smaller stores and the individual stores in the states that don't have monopolies and things like that, and have big stores and multiple store setups and things like that.
Exactly, and the big drive right now is, of course, direct to consumer.
Right, of course.
So the more that you can just sell it straight to the guy that's going to drink it, you pick up all the margins in between.
Well, that's for sure. That's certainly for sure. I know when we owned our winery, which we no longer have, our favorite was, of course, selling it at retail right out the cellar door. That was the best for us because we made all the money on it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Unfortunately, as you grow, you can't keep doing that. But so kind of on the flip side of what you implemented, were there any traditions that you really decided that you wanted to keep as you took over the reins from your dad?
Well, I wanted to keep the sense of balance.
Yeah,
I think that's important. I wanted to keep, and I was very cognizant of this. My sister came in and was the CEO of our company, and I came into winemaking because of all the other 3rd, 4th, 5th generation families at that point in time, none of the family members went into winemaking. I think it's very important to keep that signature line that I was talking about earlier going forward. So I was one of just like 2 or 3 3rd generation winemakers. And because of that, we've kept the continuity of Louis Martini.
Right.
And it's like you're supposed to say it 3 times in a speech so that people remember whatever it was you were saying.
That's right.
We've said it for 80 years now. The Lord knows how many millions of times. So hopefully somebody remembers out there. But you don't want to lose them either. So you want to keep why they invested in you to begin with.
Sure.
And that's style.
Sure, absolutely. As you kind of look forward towards the future, I assume you have. I know you have other projects going on. You actually gave me a bottle of, I think, what you called M Squared a couple of years ago when we last saw each other, and which I have to say we have yet to drink. So you need to tell me whether it's ready.
Oh no, I hope it's. Yeah.
But
it's time to cope with it.
I assume it's going to age well because you made it. But I know you have side projects that go on and lots of interests. But do you want to touch on a couple of those before we go to break, and then we'll come back obviously and talk about the winery and Martini and the legacy and the brand. But what do you have in the cooker that you're really excited about right now?
Well, M Squared is my own personal little tiny brand of 150 cases a year, made from the oldest Cabernet vines in the state of California. And they are actually grown. My grandfather planted them, and they're grown on the Monte Rosso vineyard up on top of the Mayacamba Mountains. And in terms of drinkability, anytime between now and the time you die.
Okay. So
that makes me feel good.
It's that aging.
I got to. I had a 3-liter sold to some customer of 1987 Monte Rosso Cabernet. And this is a vineyard that I'm drinking from the 40s and stuff off the vineyard now.
Right.
And the person from the tasting room brought it up and said, they want you to sign it, and they want you to put on when to drink it. So I had to say, well, how many gray hairs do they have? It's basically, always thought, well, if I knew all the tricks my dad knew when he stopped making wine and I started making wine, and I knew them then I'm guaranteed, because I know his wine's aged. You know, I'm guaranteed to see my wine's well into the future, or maybe not even see the end of it. And well, now I'm there. I do know all these tricks, and I know what makes great wine. And I think I do. I'm still learning. But the problem is, I know I'm not going to be around to taste them when they get there. So, so now my saying is, drink it before you die. Don't sit on it forever.
Well, I agree with that.
You know, it's interesting.
I always got more. I got more M squared. I'll send you some more, David.
Well,
so is M squared part of the Cellar 54? Is that part of the Cellar 54?
I make it in Cellar 54 as a custom crush. So the difference is this: is that when we commercially make wine for the marketplace, we're trying to fit a profile and a price point. And because of that, there's certain sacrifices that you make that if you were just an artisan winemaker totally, you probably wouldn't make those sacrifices. M squared is I don't make those sacrifices. I do everything that I think is required to make the best wine I could possibly make, and then just make sure I have a price tag on it that covers it so I don't lose money. And I just keep it very small. You know, it's probably my house wine at home. I drink more M squared than I sell probably, but I like it because it came out. It's 42 months in wood and 3.5 years in the bottle before I release it. So,
wow, that's a long time. That's a long time in oak.
Yeah, that's just when but that's just when, you know, at the end of that period is when it really comes into harmony with itself.
Sure,
and
absolutely.
Only improved from there. But I started in 2001, so I've got 10 vintages in the bottle, and none of them are really showing any age yet.
Well, that's great. Well, we can't wait to try that. But then, Melanie, we have to obviously make a great dinner and try that bottle that Michael gave us. And then the next one you give us, Michael, hopefully we'll be able to share together.
There you go.
Yeah.
So let's make it back up to Aspen. I think it'll probably be this next year.
There you go. Well, we'll do that soon, I'm sure. That's a great spot.
So other projects, I'm in a group called Men Who Cook. It's a series of winery owners, and we get together. There's 13 of us. We get together once a month, and one of us puts a dinner on, and we usually pick a theme. This year is foods from around the world. We've had 1 year where we had to cook out of Julia Child's cookbook. We've had 1 year where it was wine regions of the world.
So speaking of price point, what is the price?
With the what? Excuse me.
I think we're getting a little bit of technical difficulty, I think, from Melanie, but we can certainly continue while she keeps coming on.
I'm back. I'm
you
back.
are?
I lost everybody for a minute.
I know, we lost you. Well, welcome to radio. We lost you for a minute.
Oh, God, I haven't moved. That's so bizarre.
Anyway.
So you were asking the price point on something?
Yes. Just to give listeners an idea of the range.
Okay, I make a Sonoma County Cabernet. You can probably find out in the marketplace around $18, sometimes down to $14.99. I make a Napa Valley and Alexander Valley Cabernet. They both come in right around $30. I make a Monterosso Cabernet that comes in at $85, a very, very small production on that. And even smaller production, Lot 1, which is our Napa Valley Reserve, comes in about $140, and if you can find it to begin with. And then my M squared, which is not marketed with the other wines, it's marketed separately, is at $150. So that's
so something for everybody, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's good, because I think that's important. You know, sometimes you get to get people into the entry level and then move them up, but then you've got your passionate collectors who want something as well.
Well, by far, our Sonoma and Napa Valley wines are the most popular out there, and they're the ones that are going around the world. I just introduced the Napa Valley in Toronto, Ontario, and I introduced it a couple of years ago in Sweden.
The Swedes love wine. They're big wine drinkers.
Yeah, well, they do a lot of grilling up there.
Yeah,
big game people.
What do they grill? Reindeer?
That's one of many. Yeah.
Well, we're gonna need to take a quick break and feed the beast, as they say. And Melanie's got a couple of announcements about the Connected Table and where it airs and when it airs and things like that. And then when we come back, Michael, we'd love to obviously continue the conversation with you and talk about
Napa,
more about you and Napa, and we'd love to touch on the recent earthquake out in Napa and how Napa's coping with that as well, if you want to give us a little bit insight as to what's going on there. But first, we're going to take a quick break, and Melanie, it's all yours.
All right. Well, first of all, a few things. I want to give a shout out, David. I want to give a shout out to Farmer Lee Jones. Yesterday, we received a bonanza of vegetables, perfect vegetables from the chef's garden. It was just like raining vegetables, and I can't wait to have a vegetarian banquet. So thank you, Farmer Lee. Our show next week is going to be Spirited Women. We're going to have Elizabeth de Trinidad on from Machu Picchu and Allison Patel from Brenne Whiskey. So we're going to have a women in whiskey show, so please tune in for that. Beautiful products. Also, little shout out from my show, Fearless Fabulous You, on Monday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. My guests will be Lisa Alschuler, who is a naturopathic oncologist, and Carolyn Gazella. They wrote the definitive guide to cancer and Five to Thrive, and they have a show I was just on last night called Five to Thrive Radio and W4CS. So I'm looking forward to that. We're going to be talking about naturopathic way to go for treatment and supplements and health. So please tune in at w4wn.com. So hoping everybody will listen in. Other than that, David, what else do we have going on?
Well, I think it's good to let everybody know that the Connected Table is broadcast live on Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on W4CY Radio, but it's also available on iHeart Radio as a download. You can get that app through the iTunes Store, or you can get the do it online on your computer, no matter how you want to do it. But iHeartRadio also carries all the podcasts for download and for your listening pleasure as well. And if you want to keep up with us on Twitter, our handle is The Connected Table.
At Connected Table.
Connected Table.
Yeah,
and
at Connected Table.
W4C Radio is at W4CY Radio.
And
we'd love to connect with you that way, and on Facebook as The Connected Table as well.
We want to hear from everybody. We want to hear what you want to talk about, because we want this to be your delicious hour. How many more minutes do we have? Seconds, David?
Oh, we're fine. We're actually ready to welcome Michael back, I think. Michael, how are you?
I'm good. Welcome
back, Michael Martini. We are honored to have you. We've been talking about the heritage and tradition of your family winery that your grandfather started 81 years ago, and the signature Cabernets. You also offer a wine club, I see. Anybody can sign up for it?
Yes, you go online to louismartini.com and all one word, and tell them that you're over 21 years old.
Yeah, yeah.
And they'll let you in. Once you get in, you can sign up. You can sign up online for it. Usually, I think it's quarterly. You get 2 bottles of wine if you live in the right state. Of course, that's state dependent upon your local laws. Shipped to you. You put your Visa card in, and we'll give you a trial of 2 different wines on a quarterly basis, and then you are able to purchase at discount those particular wines. You can do it if you're going to be out of in wine country. You want to stop by and pick it up, they'll hold it for you, or they'll ship it to you if that's legal.
And you, your tasting room is open every day, or
360 days a year.
Wow.
Yeah, we take off Christmas and Thanksgiving, things like that.
That's the wine business.
Yep,
it certainly is.
You're welcoming you from I believe 10 o'clock in the morning until 6 o'clock at night.
So we didn't. How's harvest going? You're in the middle of harvest now. So tell us how things are going.
Pretty much, it's just ramping up. Really, this week we came out of a batch of 95 and 100-degree weather the last 3 days. It's supposed to cool down to about 85 today. It's beautiful and clear out. But that is just like perfect. You know, the grapes love it at 77 degrees is the optimum ripening temperature for a grape.
Right.
And it gets up to 100, the vine shuts down, and when it goes down to 50, it shuts down.
Right.
So 77 is where they like it, and we're really doing that the rest of this week. We're at 77, and we're picking like crazy right now. So we have all of the Zinfandels in. They came in a little early, and I was a little thinking they didn't have enough hang time. The hang time really builds a lot more flavor and aroma into a wine. But I've been looking at the juice in the tank and kind of going, oh, well, yeah, maybe it's okay. And then when I got about halfway through fermentation, they just became huge, beautiful Zinfandels. One of the best Zinfandels I think we've made.
Really?
Pinot Noirs are doing the same thing. They're a little insipid, as juice. I mean, you never really see that much varietal character as juice anyhow, but they're a little insipid as juice, but then they've really been developing in fermentation. So now we're working on the Cabernets. We're seeing a little bit of that, but we're early in the season yet, Cabernet season. we're probably got about 40 to 50% of our crop still out, and but we're ramping through that as fast as we can possibly go at this point in time, because everything's ripe, basically, if you're looking at the sugars. And of course, we pick by taste, and so it's a debate whether it's just sugar or do we have all the flavor components and the tannins that we need and things like that, too. So yeah, it's going really well. I think that the berries are a little smaller because of the drought we have out here. They didn't have as much moisture to swell up as much, and that's going to make richer wines, more tannic wines.
Because there's more concentration in the grape then.
Yeah,
Right.
I believe so. Yeah. And that's in my brain directly related to the drought. We have a little bit of water to apply, but not very much water to apply to the vineyard, so they came in on the low side this year.
Wow.
Other than that, it's looking good. I mean, like every other harvest, you can look across the landscape, and those vineyards that have been picked have already turned yellow, and those that haven't are still green. And as soon as you pick them, they turn yellow. So,
I was wondering how the drought was affecting the area.
it's severe.
Well, there's been so much talk about it in all news now that it seems to be on the airwaves a lot, and it's not just obviously affecting the wine industry. But tell us a little bit about your thoughts on how the drought in California, which is really just one of the worst ever at this point, is affecting grape production and wine production, and a little bit of your thoughts on that.
It's not just grape and wine production. This year we're okay. We're having an average crop in terms of the amount that we're picking out. Even though they may be a little bit smaller berries, I think we maybe set a few more berries. Nature has a tendency to try to create more seeds for the survival of the species. I notice my acorns on my oak trees at my house are just tons of acorns this year, and likewise tons of squirrels because they like acorns.
Isn't that the truth?
So I suspect that the next thing I'm going to see is starting to see the falcons and the hawks coming around to eat the squirrels. But I know going out to the coast.
Let's go about the drought. And
I know that going out to the coast, where we get into dairy country in Sonoma, is that the grass never got more than an inch or two high. Never grew this year. There was so little rain in it. And that was all the way up to March. In the beginning of March, we had one storm, first week of March, it was about 12 inches. And then the grass came up, and then about 2 weeks later, we had another 5 inches, and it almost looked like it was going to be normal, but the little bit of grass that did come up, the cows ate it right back down again. So the farmers are feeding. They're feeding hay. They're buying loads and loads of hay. That's unusual. They usually don't do that. It's got to be costing the farmers a lot of money. I know that the agricultural industry and the grape industry down in the San Joaquin Valley, there's lots of areas that are just dried up, and they're pulling the vineyards out.
oh my goodness.
And they're going into almonds, because
almonds.
or, as they call them down there, almonds. But anyway, they're going because when they're little tiny trees, they don't take too much water. And so they can do that changeover now without utilizing a lot of water.
Right.
And almonds are a much higher paying crop than grapes are.
So that's interesting, because I remember in Spain they went to beets. What is it? So the economic impact is major here. And the thing is, we don't really know what's happening in terms of global warming. Is this going to be something for the future? I mean, how is the industry preparing for the what ifs?
We did a study, and I took all of my picking records back to the early 1940s, and so did the other older wineries, and we sent them down to Scripps Institute of Oceanography down in Pomona, and they looked at them and determined that in the last 40 to 50 years, there has been no global warming by day, and the nighttime temperature has come up by about 2 degrees. The word for the coastal areas is, what we call San Francisco air conditioning. As the Central Valley gets very hot, the air rises and pulls the air off the water, and that forms fog and cools us down. And Bakersfield, which is basically desert, that's what Sacramento, which is pretty rich farmland right now, Sacramento will become the new Bakersfield if the global warming goes the way that those that totally believe in it think it will, and that'll cause us to go into more fog, and we'll actually cool down. So we'll become more Bordeauxish. and I don't expect to see this in my lifetime, so
Well,
that's for our kids to worry about. But it's obviously as we populate the face of the earth, to population densities that cause all sorts of different equations. You look at all the things going on in the world right now. Just to be a little philosophical, they populate rats in the cage to the point where rats suddenly turn on each other and start eating each other. Well, maybe we're there, with what's going on with the Middle East and Russia and so forth and so on. They had a situation in California where the politicians realized that by 2020 the population of California was going to be too great to have enough water for it already without a drought. And they weren't really addressing the issue. So Governor Brown just signed in to law, and he has another one proposition on the ballot this year. But he just signed into law monitoring of groundwater usage, so that we can get some sort of balance going. Because right now, what they're doing is drying up all the aquifers. Everybody's just digging deeper and deeper wells.
yeah.
Right.
And so I think that's a good first step.
Yeah.
Because somehow we're going to have to figure out how to live with this. Because even without a drought, we're getting too many people.
Well, you can't redirect any more water to it. You've already done all that. So it's a question of being able to deal with what you've got. I think one of the most dire places that this is happening for wine regions, at least, is probably Paso Robles, where there's been such growth over the last 15 years or so with wineries going in and crops going in that they've basically dried up their aquifer, and now they don't know what to do. And it's really a huge problem.
Well, I see the same thing coming to Napa Valley, because right now I know of 5 major wineries being constructed. This is on top of the 500 that will ever be there. And these are big buildings.
Yeah.
So they're going to use a lot of water.
Yeah,
basically, you're kind of looking at a formula of 2 to 3 gallons of water per gallon of wine produced.
I was just going to ask you that.
Wow.
I was going to ask you that question, and thank you for bringing it up, because I've always wondered what that ratio is, and now we know.
Well, there's a way, and the Australians have done it out of need. There is a way to recycle your water that you pull 10% out with each pass. That is kind of, you might say, sludged out, and it's distilled off, and then you recycle the water back through again, and then you have to replenish 10%. So you basically reduce your use by 90%. And I know we're starting to look at those technologies. The E&J Gallo people are seriously looking at those technologies, because they run some big facilities, and it means a lot to them, to reduce even 50% your water usage.
Sure.
Wow.
So
it's a lot.
Well, it's obviously something that we all have to obviously monitor and keep on top of. And I think this is a good segue. I'd love to talk to you about Gallo. And in 2002,
yes.
The Gallo family purchased Louis Martini Winery, and you folks have kind of been under their wing ever since. And I'd love to touch on that and what it meant to you to have that happen, and what some of the realizations have been from it.
Well, we did it because of what I was talking about earlier, the consolidation of the distributors. And we were looking for a way to cope and keep our brand alive. And I think, and they approached us and they said, well, we're looking to get into the Napa Valley, and we've looked at 5 wineries, and your winery is the one that our family can agree upon, because our philosophies were basically very, very similar.
Right.
We believe in putting wine on the table at a good value, so that we promote people using wine as regular consumption in their diet. And so we were very compatible. They're a closed Italian family corporation. We're a closed family Italian corporation, So there was a lot of compatibilities, and we really, when they approached us and said, so would you like to do business? And, automatically said, yeah, we'd like your distribution system.
Yeah, of course. Nobody's ever done it like them. They've got one of the most incredible marketing systems, I think, that exists in any business. And they're legendary for it, not only within the wine industry, but in others as well, about what they created for themselves. And to be involved in that, I think, must have just been a huge boon for you guys.
Oh, it's been great. The brand has gotten very, very healthy. We did focus strictly on Cabernet, so we're a Cabernet house now. Totally. So some of those other varieties I was talking about earlier went to the wayside. But that was because we're talking to a lot of people, so we have to make it a relatively simple story.
Right.
And they've been incredibly successful with it. They're actually in 85 countries.
Right.
And they have a huge import lineup too of wines from all over the world.
Yeah.
So in conjunction with all of these other brands and stuff like that, it's just been a really good marriage. They have a tremendous sense of place, and whether we're talking, Gascon from Argentina, or the Las Rocas from Spain, they always allow the winery and the winemakers to make the decision on how to interpret that sense of place. Right. And that was one of the reasons I got along with them. Yeah. Simultaneously, Matt Gallo was saying to me, he goes, well, the way I see this relationship is for you to make the absolute best Cabernet you possibly can, and for us to give you the resources to make this happen. And because of that, we built Cellar 254.
Right.
Which is a gravity flow winery, a very small, all hands on, and that's where we make all of our top wines.
And you'd probably is that
like
the facility?
Laboratory.
You probably do R&D in there too, right?
Yes. Oh, tons of R&D.
Yeah.
And so I think our wines are actually getting better and better every year because of the R&D. And, we've been trying all sorts of things out, just trying to stay on the cutting edge. We try all sorts of different tank sizes and shapes and materials that you build them out of, and ways to, say, dry stems to put them back into Pinot Noir, or even to the point of toasting stems.
Interesting.
Like that. Just
really
all sorts of things that we're just playing with in trying to make better wine.
Yeah.
And more interesting wines. And those things that we really see have value. If I could talk about one, it's called Submerged Cap, where we actually, there's a separation of the skins and the pulp that float up to the top of the tank, and therefore not in touch with the juice itself. And so somehow you have to put those back into the juice, because the extraction from the skins is where you get all your color and a lot of your aroma and flavor.
Right. Yeah.
And so Submerged Cap is technology. We actually saw the Aussies were doing it, where you have a screen and you push the cap down, just hold it halfway down the tank.
So it's almost like fermenting sauerkraut, but it's making wine.
That's exactly
right.
And it creates an array of different aromas and compounds that are actually very advantageous.
I bet it does.
Our top wines, are 120-year-old Zinfandel, and our top Cabernets, we do maybe 30% of the production that way. So
well, it's interesting that you can do that. It's funny because a number of years ago, when my family first got into the wine business, we attended a dinner with the Gallos, and their philosophy at that point was, within a certain number of years, I think it was the next 10 years or something like that, we want to have the Gallo name off of all our bottles of wine. And it was at that point that they started buying up other wineries in California in order to do that. And I can only assume that your winery was one of the ones they were looking at that point, although they hadn't made the jump, because this was pre-2002. But it was an interesting philosophy to them, because they had been so known for producing gallon jugs of wine and just mass marketing wine, and they really wanted to make a jump to finer wines and creating a legacy of creating fabulous wines. And with people like you now in the fold, they're doing that. And it's just a kind of an interesting story of how do we make ourselves better coming from such a large corporation like that.
Yeah, well, they brought back, and the actual Gallo of Sonoma went away.
Yeah.
And I remember when they first purchased this, I walked around the tank farm up there, and it was Gallo Sonoma, Fry Brothers, Gallo Sonoma, McMurray Ranch, and a tank of Louis Martini. And now there's no Gallo Sonoma up there. And Gina has come out with her own signature series. Only like 8,000 cases across 3 or 4 varieties, but they're really good wines. And she's making them at our facility. She's making them at William Hill's facility. But it's really coming out, and they're starting to get the recognition they deserve.
Right.
But it's a generational type of thing where it takes generations to forget an image. And as the next generations come on, the old Gallo image won't be there.
Right.
And they'll be free to flow. But in the meantime, they put on a huge portfolio of labels that don't have Gallo anywhere on the bottle.
Right,
Interesting.
exactly.
And we're one of them. And we were actually the very first acquisition they made.
And
Really?
you were
Yeah.
that I did not know. That I
I
did
didn't know
not
that
know.
either.
They had
Wow.
never bought a company before. We had never been through transition. We hadn't either. And about 3 or 4 months after us, they purchased Marisu.
Yeah, and
Uh-huh.
and what's interesting about it is that you look at a Louis Martini bottle of wine and there's no Gallo on there anywhere. So
No,
it's
no.
you really have the autonomy, but you have that kind of father figure in the background that's kind of helping you along, which is
Yeah,
which
it's
is a great
great.
relationship in my opinion.
It's great to have their
Yeah.
resources. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So one of the things that happened, because it was a segue of different types, is one of the things that happened was they came in and earthquake-proofed my winery, and we literally finished earthquake-proofing it about 3 or 4 months ago.
Oh, wow.
Oh, well, that's
With the earthquake, the recent 6.0 earthquake that hit Napa, we had a bottle of Petit Sirah, 2 glasses fall off the bar, and that was it.
Wow.
And it was,
Wow.
I'm north of the winery, and I was sitting in a chair. It was 3:20 in the morning. I was sitting in a chair and had fallen asleep in, and I was definitely woke up, and it was like riding a bucking bronco. I mean, the waves were just rippling through my house. We had one vase come off, and it took a lamp out on the way down.
Right.
The real damage was downtown Napa and the fault line. And if you're going across on Highway 121, which goes through the Canaris, right about Cuttings Wharf Road, you can see where the yellow lines actually slid. There was a fissure across the road, and the yellow lines were offset from each other by about a foot.
oh my,
That
that's pretty big.
Yeah.
It was huge, and unfortunately, you really can't afford earthquake insurance. It just costs so much, and then they have huge deductibles on this thing.
Oof. So a lot of
And,
people really were affected that way. They have a lot of expenses now to rebuild.
Huge people. I have
Huge.
a couple of employees that like every wall and ceiling in their house is cracked,
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
and they just got to go in and fix it. Which kind of brings me to a point that the Gallows for all of that put up $100,000 to the local Red Cross.
Mm.
The Napa Valley Vintners put up $10 million to a local fund called the Napa Valley Community Foundation, and that is for $350,000 either interest-free or grant money or whatever. It goes through an evaluation system
Wow.
through several different agencies. But if you go into the NapaValleyVintner.com/earthquake/donate.asp, you can actually donate into this fund. And the other way you can go is go to the redcross.org /California/Napa/ways to donate, and you can donate to the Red Cross.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. We have about 2 minutes to wrap. And I think another way we want to support Napa is to let people know it's open for business and welcoming everybody, and that we encourage people to come out and visit, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, we're very open for business, and I think people got that message because we're jam-packed again. So,
Hey, that's really, really great.
yeah, there are some businesses, some places in downtown Napa that aren't open for business, but there's a lot of places around them that are. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's good to hear that you guys have weathered the storm. Obviously, we saw a lot of pictures of tumbled barrels and stacks of barrels that came down and whatnot, and damage to buildings in downtown Napa. But obviously, the grapes are going to continue to grow and the harvest is going to continue to go on. And you got to do what you got to do. So I know everybody kind of knows that Napa is obviously going to bounce back pretty quickly and pretty well from this. So it's nice to hear actually firsthand that is indeed happening.
Yeah, I think there's a hashtag called Napa Strong, right? Hashtag Napa Strong for everybody to support their area. And it will come back, and it's going to have continue to have beautiful wines, and we all need to support. Also, buy the wines. Go to your store and buy Napa wines.
Yeah, that's a must because that's obviously our single biggest point of revenue.
Well,
yeah,
that's why we're here.
So you don't have to get in a plane to go to Napa. You can go to your local store and buy the wine.
And you can always support it that way. Listen, Michael.
Louis Martini.
Of course. Well, listen,
Yes.
Michael, we're out of time, but it's been such a pleasure having you on our show to talk about you, your family, and your family's winery and the legacy that you all have in Napa, and
Right.
just kind of share that story with the public. Really enjoyed having you on, and hopefully we'll get to have a bottle of wine together sometime in the near future. And we look forward to getting updates from you, of course, as we go along.
Great. It was good talking to you both.
Well, pleasure. Thank you.
Okay.
Folks, we're out of time, as I said, but this is the Connected Table Live. We will be back next Wednesday afternoon, 2 p.m. Eastern Time on W4CY Radio with another great show for you, and we look forward to hearing from you all and having you listen in then. Thanks so much, and this is David Ransom and Melanie Young signing off.